This is episode number 251, and today you're in for a treat. Not one, not two, not three, but four guests, and we're going to talk about your path as an artist. It doesn't really have anything to do with plein air painting, but it does. You'll find out more, developing your own style, and a lot more. Guests are the great living master Albert Handell, William A. Schneider, Jill Stephanie Wagner, and Aaron Schuerr. Let's get this thing started.
This is the Plein Air Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of Plein Air magazine. In the Plein Air Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called Plein Air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it Plein Air. Others say Plein Air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Nothing like a little Mozart to get things started. You're in for a treat today. Four artists and lots of answers to questions that I get all the time. I finally decided, because I get the questions all the time, I was going to get some experts on and record it. That's what you're going to hear today. I am coming to you from the Adirondacks in upstate New York, and I have been painting every weekend since I've been here. And I've been painting in my little wooden electric boat. It's quite an experience. The other day, quite a shaky experience, a lot of ski boats going by. But it's trying, and sometimes it's fun, and sometimes I'm learning something. But that's the most important thing. Anyway, I posted lots of pics on my Instagram, which you can see at Rhoads. And I love it when you send emails. I received one from a listener in Poland I thought was worth sharing with you guys. Says, I am only writing to say I've been listening to your podcast from Poland, just in case you didn't know you've got listeners in that part of the globe. That's nice to hear. We have people in a couple hundred countries, I think. Thank you for your work. I enjoy every podcast very much. It's very informative too. It was a great pleasure to listen to you speak with such artists as Joseph Bukvich, Alvaro Castanet, Thomas W. Schuerr, and I have had no chance to meet any of them in person. By the way, is Herman Pickel in your plans? Absolutely. As I implied above, I'm into watercolor, although I tried my hand at some other mediums. I guess I could call myself a hobby artist. Unfortunately, I have no knowledge of the plein air movement here in Poland, and I reckon that the weather is not conductive, yes, I guess, to such activity. And there's no such tradition here. Do you have any knowledge of plein air events anywhere else in Central Europe? Anyway, it was just supposed to be a thank you email, and I'm rambling on. Thanks, regards, Alicia Joroko Hokpa. I probably butchered that, Alicia. Thank you for that. I appreciate the letter. Thanks for the kind words. We do have people listening in a lot of countries, and it's encouraging to see people interested in plein air. You can follow us on Instagram on Plein Air Mag and a lot of different things on social media. I will book Herman Pickel. We'll make a note of that right now. Since you love watercolor so much, I would love to have you come to our worldwide online watercolor event in January. It's called Watercolor Live. And since you were so kind to send a letter, I'm going to be so kind and send you a free entry to the Essentials Day, which is the first day, which you can attend separately. And that's going to be my gift to you. My producer will reach out and give you that ticket. We have people attending from all over the world, and we have about 30 top watercolor masters teaching, and that's going to be Watercolor Live in January. For a long time, there wasn't a lot of activity in Europe, but things are changing. The people at the show called Art in the Open, I did an interview with them, and they told me that the plein air movement is really starting to take hold there. They liked what was going on here based on what they were hearing on the Plein Air Podcast. and they started pushing it more and more. Now they've got this big event in in Ireland that really attracts a lot of people from all over the world, and that's really cool. I want to go. It's always in the summertime when I'm here in the Adirondacks. But anyway, that's big. They told me that there's a lot of influence from Plein Air magazine and from online and social media, and that there's more activity happening in Europe than ever before. Actually, Plein Air painting, of course, started technically in France. If you consider the Impressionists, the beginning of the movement, I don't. I think it was way earlier than that. There's some evidence of that. But that would have been in Spain, actually. And now, actually, there are some events, quite a few events happening in Spain. Pablo Rubin told me about lots and lots of Plein Air events almost every weekend in Spain. So check that out. I'm sure you can find some. And I recommend that you try Plein Air painting if you've not. We paint in good and bad weather. We're not fair weather painters. It's not just a summer sport. I know you have good weather in Poland because you have spring, summer, and fall. So get out and try it. It'll change your life. I think so, and make you a better painter in a lot of ways. And I bet if you poke around on Facebook or Instagram with keywords of Plein Air, you'll start discovering people that you can meet throughout Europe that you can go and paint with. And I emphasize, you can start a group. Just posting something on local sites or boards or Meetup or social media, you'll find other Plein Air painters or people want to go outdoors and paint. Start a local group, go to a local art school, association, get it started. That's what I did. You can do it. Thank you for that letter. You guys can send your feedback or your letters or emails. I don't know if I've ever got a letter in the last 20 years. Anyway, you can send your feedback to eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Thanks again to FeedSpot for making this the #1 art podcast 2 years in a row. We love it when you guys are giving us high ratings on your platforms, Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening. It helps others discover us and find out about Plein Air. And a quick reminder, we have Pastel Live coming up in mid-August. I was not a pastel painter, but I did it anyway, and I not only discovered lots of approaches and styles and things I never understood about pastel, I found some advantages, some ways that sometimes pastel is the only medium that'll work with what you're trying to accomplish. And it helped me get re-energized about all my painting. It helped me discover that my oil and my watercolor painting were actually made better because I was learning pastel, because there were things that I learned in pastel that I've applied to watercolor and oil that I had never thought of doing before. So it's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun to get to know people from around the world. We have people attending from many, many countries, and you get to access about 25 top pastel leaders who are teaching and demos, answering questions. And if nothing else, attend the Essentials Day, the first day. Check it out at pastellive.com. 3 other things real quickly. Though our Japan Plein Air trip is sold out very quickly, we decided to take a wait list because we are trying to squeeze in a few more people. Buses are smaller in Japan. They have fewer people. I guess because roads are narrower. Anyway, so we can't add more than we can hold in a bus to take you to locations. But I think we're going to try to add a couple more. Because of cherry blossom season, rooms are really hard to get. But if we can get some more rooms at the hotels we've booked, then we'll try to squeeze some more in. So join the waiting list at pleinairjapan.com. And it's going to be a busy fall for all of us, but especially for me, because I've got my Fall Color Week Artist Retreat. And this will be the last time we're doing it in the stunning Adirondack Mountains where the color vibrates. It's just incredible. You can get fall color in a lot of places in the U.S., but you can't get brilliant fall color in a lot of places. And, get mountains in the background and to have that juxtaposition of, yellow and red trees against a purple mountain and a lake. Man, the mountains were just glowing red last fall. So anyway, I only have 11 more seats this year, and they're going to go fast. Go to fallcolorweek.com. Last, I'm taking a bunch of art lovers or collectors on a tour of some European cities this year, behind the scenes this October, to some amazing art where we're going to do museums, special privileges. We're going to have some art visits, some artist visits, studio visits, a lot of different things. We're keeping it smaller this year so we can get access to places that we normally couldn't get access to with a bigger group. And we do have room for a few more, but not many more. I don't know how many, but this is a painting trip that this is not a painting trip. Sorry. But I always squeeze some painting in. But, it's really great. It's really the privileges that we end up giving you are pretty amazing. I mean, some behind this, I have held a Van Gogh in my hands. I have been in the Sistine Chapel privately. That's unheard of. We've been in the Vasari corridor, which was never open to the public, privately. We went to the home of Alphonse Mucha privately to see his personal collection. I mean, there's 1,000 more examples of that over 11 years. And this year we're going to Stockholm, and then we're going to Madrid, and you should go book it. It's going to be amazing. Just go to finearttrip.com. And if you live in any of those places and you're listening, email me. We might want to get together and paint or hang out or have a cocktail or something. Coming up after this special 4-person discussion, I'm going to answer art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. And of course, you can send your questions in to me anytime, eric@artmarketing.com. And we love having you here. So let's get right to our interview today. I'm leading a discussion of 4 world-class artists, Jill Stephanie Wagner, Albert Handell, Aaron Schuerr, William A. Schneider. And we talk about how to develop your own personal style, how to stimulate yourself to the next level, how to move forward when you're stuck. And our 4 guests are going to give you their best tips and advice on how to become a great artist, to have a great career. This was done last week live. People loved it so much, we're putting it here on the podcast. Enjoy. Let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone.
We're glad you're here. All right. So we have met on a couple of occasions working on this today. And I've got a lot of questions, but I'm going to start out with a big one. And we're going to do ladies first in this case. And then we're going to go to each of you. Jill, how do you find your personal style, your personal voice? That's the biggest question I get all the time.
Well, I think when we're just starting out, a lot of us want that. We see other artists who have something that's recognizable in any one of their paintings. And I wanted to do that as well. And I went to the woman that was my mentor at the time and said, I don't have a style. I just pop all over the place. Nothing looks the same. And how do I get my style? And the first thing she said is that your style will come to you. You don't go to the style. The more you paint, the more your style will come forward. But the other thing she did to make it easier for me to understand, she said, I think you should paint one subject 25 times. Not the same reference photo, but the same subject matter, so that you learn something inside and out. If you flit around to a whole bunch of different things, you don't ever get a good grasp of one subject matter. And the other thing she told me to do, which was very helpful for me, was to paint large. You're painting way too small. You're painting these little teeny weeny paintings, get big. So I did that. I did 25 paintings of river stones, which I was doing mostly as studies. They were 30 inches high and 15 inches wide. And they all sold. And it really put me on a path to painting in a series. So that helped me get a style.
Awesome. All right. Next, we're going to go to Albert. Albert, did you ever have that struggle?
What struggle is that?
Trying to find a style.
Oh, no, I just kept painting. As I look back on my career, I had a preponderance for transparent color, including in oils. And when I studied at the Art Students League, that was discouraged, and large brushes were encouraged and all that. And I learned how to do that. The first day, I laid it out the way I lay things out now. Second day, I covered it all up so I could do proper painting, and I really felt depressed. And then the third day, a lot of this stuff is the nude and all that. I took it out of the toilet bowl, as I used to say, and did this, that, and the other thing. And the painting was much better, much more alive. And I said, this process really doesn't work for me. And I got very good in the process. I started working with small brushes and all that. And after 8-9 years of doing very, very well, I had a show coming up at the ACA Gallery, and I had a painter's block, which basically meant I wasn't going to mix those oils up again and again. And something said pastel. And when I called up my friends, buy this, buy that, it was like a fish going into water. I didn't have all those tapes in my head. And it was through the pastel that I found another Albert, which has been wonderful to greet and has affected my oils and my transparency for my oils and my pastel is a big thing for me personally. And I started off with that, and I got waylaid. I walked down the garden path, and it was a fun trip. But sometimes you're just going to have to work at it and see how you feel and moderate things so that what you're doing works best with your feelings. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, it does, but I have a couple of probing questions as a result of that. You said that you got depressed and you said this process isn't working for me, but you said also I pulled it out of the toilet and reworked it and it got good. So what was it that you did that changed it, that made you go from it not being good to being good? Was it just working at it some more?
Seeing it freshly, doing this, that, and the other thing, and that was the end of it. Going back to the things that I initially established and having them stand out more than all the shoulds that I was dealing with the second day.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question. I studied photography under a guy named Franz Picker, who was a student of Ansel Adams. And one of the things he said has really helped me in painting, and I'm curious if this is what happened to you. He said, put it down for 6 months or a year and don't even look at it. Turn it to the wall and then come back to it. Do you find that just having the time to get away from things improves your ability, or are you beyond that now?
Oh, no, I'm not beyond that. A fresh look is perfect. And I do precisely what he told you to do. And it works like wonders for me. I started painting pastel on location or an oil in the studio. And after a session or two, God, I got something. And what I do is I sign them right then and there. I say to myself, if I walk out of the door and I get a heart attack, does this picture at the state that it's in deserve a signature? And I say, yeah, what the heck, why not? And I do that so I don't have to go through the agony of, is it finished? Can I sign it?
Yeah.
That thing could be very painful for an experienced artist. I don't know if that helps your question.
That helps me a lot. All right, next we're going to go to Bill Schneider. Bill?
Hi.
What about you? Did you ever struggle with finding your look, your voice?
You talking about yesterday, or we always struggle? I remember when I was starting out, I would see these great artists, contemporary artists, and I would, have them on the pedestal. Oh, I am not worthy. And I have come to realize in conversation with other artists that I admire, you talk to a Dan Gerhardt, who, in my opinion, is one of the best artists that has lived ever.
And one of the great guys of all time.
Yes, absolutely. But if you ask these artists that you have on a pedestal, well, what are you working on? What are you struggling with? They'll rattle off 5 or 6 things. And so it never ends. That's the beauty of art. That's why I gave up the pension consulting business, which my partners were happy that I sold it to them, and they think I'm crazy. But, it's not even a business. Art is a calling. Why do I paint? Because I have to. I must. If I don't do that, I will go crazy.
Somebody needs to put that as a quote and tweet it. Say that again. Art is a calling.
Yeah. If I don't do it, I would go crazy. I have to do it. So
it's interesting you say that, because I used to do the same thing. I'd put these guys on a pedestal, and I was talking to Richard Schmid one time. I think the first time I ever talked to him, and he was telling me about all the paintings he had just screwed up and how frustrated he was. And I said, "Oh, that's great." He said, "What do you mean it's great?" I said, "It's good to know that even you screw up your paintings." He said, "Oh, I screw them up all the time." And what he later told me, which I thought was very valuable, he said, "I spent so much time screwing up paintings because I wasn't careful enough in the beginning." He said, I painted with him, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, I guess. And I set up next to him in the garden and painted, and I tried to do what he did. And he spent a lot of time meticulously mixing things, looking up, spend, 5-6 minutes mixing. And then he'd lay his palette knife, he'd look, and he'd do one stroke. And he said, get it right the first time, because otherwise you go back and spend all your time fixing things anyway. So I thought that was interesting.
Absolutely.
So I can tell from each of you, though, that you have a style. I mean, you definitely have developed a style, but it was not intentional for you. It just came.
Yes. When I was at the American Academy, and I asked the question about, well, I want to get my own style. And I had a very, very good instructor, Bill Parks, the legendary Bill Parks. And he said, don't worry about style. Just keep trying to be honest and paint what you see and what moves you. And as Jill said, your style will come to you. I don't particularly think I have a style, but I think that that's the case with everybody. You can recognize work by various artists. You can recognize Aaron's work. You can recognize Jill's work, Albert's. But what I'm trying to do when I'm painting is basically solving problems. We're trying to capture the illusion of 3-dimensional reality on a 2-dimensional surface with little blocks of colored mud, also known as pastels. What could go wrong? So, and in that process, we have to solve different problems. We have to solve problems of placement, of drawing, of color relationships, color temperature relationships, of values, edges, design, all of that stuff. And what I just listed are the 5 things. As a beginning artist, you need to learn shape, value, color temperature, edge, and composition. And that's all. That's it.
Which one is first?
What is first? Shape, yeah. Drawing. Drawing is the most important thing, because it's, if the drawing is off, you can have the best rendering, the best color, all of that stuff, but the viewer all they'll notice is if the drawing is off. And so when I jury shows and when anybody else juries shows, if the drawing's off, that painting is dead. It goes into the reject group so that the next time you go through, you don't have to look at it. So drawing, and oh, by the way, drawing is the most trainable because there's only two components to it. There's length and there's direction. So how, what is the length from here to here of my nose and what is the angle? If I get length and angle, it has to look like what I'm trying to paint or draw.
Well, that certainly simplifies it, doesn't it? It's not all that overly complicated. It seems like it would be.
Yes.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about some of those things. Thank you, Bill. Aaron, when I judge art shows, which I do frequently, I just got finished judging a show in Spain and also the Art Renewal Center show. One thing that happens to me is I can, even though they don't put the names on artists, I can instantly identify the fingerprint of the artist. I can tell in many cases that was a Kevin McPherson or that was an Aaron Schuerr. What are your thoughts on developing personal style?
Wow. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm just so psyched to be here with this wonderful, amazing crew of artists that all inspire me. So
You're welcome.
yeah, fellow traveler with these amazing people. I think Jill said it right away. To develop a style, one, don't go looking for it, because you're going to get lost trying to look for it. And then, so I just made a quick list. Be a student, always. So there's always more to learn. So be open. And with that, I'd say there's a quote from Neil Gaiman, he's a writer, he says, make glorious mistakes. And I've always loved that. That's what I tell students all the time, make glorious mistakes. Go for it and fail spectacularly. Because if you're afraid of failing, you're gonna tighten up and your work is gonna look unresolved and not fresh. So yeah, paint from life. And with that painting from life, paint your experience. The reason that I am such an avid plein air painter is because it's not about replicating the place, it's about sharing my experience of a place. And that's how I'm gonna really develop my style, is just to respond honestly in the moment. You can do that best by working from life versus working from a photograph. Again, don't rush it. Is another thing I put down. That it'll come as you grow and develop. Process over product. It's a different way of saying the same thing. And then another thought about looking at other artists and art. Great art, whether it's historical or contemporary. Be discerning in how you look at artwork. So the artists that I really, really admire, oftentimes they are diverse enough in their approach to painting that I might just absolutely fall in love with a certain painting, the painting next to it by that same artist. It might be technically and in every way as wonderful as the other one, but the first one, that one just hits me, right here, makes me short of breath. So I need to ask the next question, why does that one hit me so hard versus say maybe the next one, even if it's, by the same artist. And so it's taking some time to analyzing, what do you really respond to in other art and why? That will help you to understand yourself, because ultimately it's about understanding yourself and being as true as you can to your experience.
So do you find that when you're out plein air painting that you also have that something takes your breath away moment and you're like, you have to really understand why it is that you're responding to that? Will that make it a stronger painting, or is there more to that?
Oh, that's an interesting question. There are moments. I remember, I think it was Kwang Ho who talked about stages of development. And the last stage he called grace, which I loved. And that's when, whether it's the landscape, the painting is carrying you along and you're just there for the ride. And I remember him saying that happens to him maybe once or twice in a year. And I'm like, but you're Kwang Ho, like, how could you? And so, so again, it's one of those things, don't go looking for it, it'll find you. There are those moments where suddenly something happens. And if you're open to that idea of making glorious mistakes, you'll be able to let that carry you along. I guess the way I would look at painting plein air landscapes is it's more about like, where am I most myself? What places can I go and work that I don't think about the state of politics, news, terrible things that are happening in the world, or personal stresses. And for me, that's just being out on location. Everything else falls away. So, and because light's changing and you have, generally a couple hours in a session, I've learned to be decisive and to go for it. And so I'm having a relationship with the landscape in the moment. And that's what just gets me excited, and it helps me to focus. I struggle a lot more in the studio to stay focused. I'll get more distracted, check social media, think, I should finish that frame or do that email. So I look for the places that I can be most true to myself and most focused, and I try to make that time for those places.
I've ruined painting sessions because I'll take a break from painting and I'll check my email, and somebody will say something that makes me mad, and next thing you know, it's like, I can't even think about this anymore. I think that's a great point. I'm going to open this up to everybody. You have a dialogue going on in your head. You're painting something. I'm just curious what that dialogue typically is. Are you saying, oh, this one's going to really sell, or the gallery's going to love this, or this is garbage, or, what kind of things are going on in your head? Anybody want to take that one?
I'll start off, because this is something that I pay a lot of attention to. As humans, we are always talking to ourselves in our heads. It's a nonstop stream of subject, verb, object. And so we can't control that, but we can control, to some extent, what the dialogue is. So if the internal dialogue is, geez, this really sucks. I started too late. I'm not going to be a good enough artist that I want to be. Maybe I should just give it all up and take up golf again. If that's the dialogue, that is not helpful. But what I have found is helpful is to ask myself paired questions. And when I say paired, I mean the two extremes. So is this stroke too light or too dark? Is it too warm? Is it too cool? Is it too vertical, or is it too horizontal? So I'm asking myself questions about a specific point, and if you ask yourself the right questions, all of the answers that are there in your subject. So, if I can say, is this too light or too dark? Well, look at the subject. Okay, how dark is the shadow under my eyebrows compared to the dark of my shirt, or the door behind me? So I can say, how dark are the darks compared to the darkest dark that I've identified? How light are the lights compared to the lightest light that I've identified? If I squint down, how sharp are the edges compared to the sharpest edge? Now, if I squint, I'm looking at myself, and I can see a sharp edge where my shirt is up against my skin. And if I stay in a deep squint and raise my eyes and look at my eyes, how sharp are the edges in my eyes compared to the edge of that shirt? If I ask myself that question, I can say, well, wow, those are just whisper soft compared to the sharpest edge. And so I'm basically directing myself to questions that can be solved by observing what's in front of me.
All right, good. Anybody else want to take
Yeah,
on?
yeah. I come in from a different angle.
All right.
I like Bill's work, and he's doing portrait, and it's very important where the corner of the nose is in relationship to the corner of the mouth, in relationship to the corner of the eye. I know what that's about because I used to do a lot of work with portraiture, and it's a great way to measure. As a landscape painter, I turn it around, and whatever hits me right then and there happens. And it's an intuitive response. And my intuition is wonderful. I've learned to respect the intuition. Now, this might not work for a portrait. Everything Bill just told you is portrait work, and God bless him and his work and portraiture. I'm talking about landscape, where you have distance behind the initial subject, where you have changing light conditions, where it's not stable. It's in the process of moving, so to speak. You have different intuitive choices and intellectual choices. Yes, I work from dark to light for sure. That's clearly that's clear. I do all sorts of things with my oil brushes and my pastels. I have found with my pastels that if I vary the pressure of each color, I have more than one color in each stick. And that means a lot to me, so I can flow with the water rather than stop and find something a little darker or a little lighter. So this understanding for landscape, this is not portraiture, has allowed me a freedom to flow from one side to the other side, varying the pressure of the pastel and varying the color.
Awesome.
So it's very intuitive. 1 second. I like to talk to myself when I'm painting, thank God. And when I demonstrate, I just open my mouth and they get to hear my thoughts. So there's a world of difference between still life, portraiture, and plein air painting and landscape. For me, I have gone from, like Bill said, you know, everything he said, I've done, and I agree. And maybe it relates to his landscapes, but it doesn't to mine.
Okay.
Mine is an intuitive, first glance response.
All right, Jill?
Well, to answer your original question, especially since I started later in life, I didn't really get
Like,
traditional training.
are you willing to say, like, approximately what age you were when you started?
I started back painting again maybe when I was maybe 48, something like that.
When you say again, had you painted as a younger person?
Yeah, I went to art school at the University of Michigan and fully intended to be a painter when I got out, until I realized the very last semester that I was going to starve to death, that I wasn't ready for that, to be able to make it a full-time career. I needed to support myself somehow. So the very last semester, I took graphics, and then I went into advertising, and there was no time to paint, especially when I owned my own agency. But when I started painting again, all those questions were going through my head. Is this going to sell? Is this good? Does this look like my mentors? I mean, all those things rush through your head and can crowd out the things that you really need to be doing. And it took me a while to figure out that, and I tell my students, and I work through the same process myself, whether I'm painting plein air, which I do most of the time, or in the studio, you have to paint with intention.
Yes.
To some extent. And what I do is, the first thing I figure is, what do I love about this scene, whether it's from a photo or plein air? What is it that makes my heart sing? Why do I have to paint this? And I write it down on a little piece of paper on my canvas. And then I say, where's my focal point? How do I move the viewer through my painting to get the effect that I want them to have? You have to paint with a voice. You have, I think, to have some kind of thing to say and lead your viewer to understanding what that is.
So what are you trying to say?
Well, it depends on what I'm looking at. Is it the glory of the sunset, or the way the waves are lapping on the water? It's not a humongous idea. It's just the idea for that painting. And actually, you could have a different idea over and over again for the same view. But without having some of that in your mind, you get lost in thinking about comparing yourself to everybody else, or just have a focus for yourself, and then do a value study. This is all before oil or pastel touches the paper.
How do you get all that stuff out of your head, Jill? We just have so much baggage. We have all, our head is always being critical. And I liked what Bill said, but the worst thing that happens to me is I'm setting up, I'm painting with some friends, and I'll go look at what they do, and I go, oh, that's so good. Mine sucks. And
yeah, exactly.
I should have done that. Then I'll start changing things. So now my rule is I never look at their work until we're all done for the day, because it influences me too much. How do you get beyond that? Or do you?
It takes time. I don't think you ever get completely over it. I mean, we're constantly every day looking at social media and seeing everybody's work in front of us, even if it's not at the same place where we're not painting the same view. So I think it's even harder than it was hundreds of years ago, because we have all of these choices to look at and so many people that we admire. At some point, you take all that in, and then you have to distill what's the most important for you, what makes your heart sing,
Okay.
And it's been a struggle for me, and it hasn't been lifelong. It has had to happen quickly, and I'm still doing it every day. I throw away at least half of what I paint, or have Tia paint over them, or brush them off. With pastels, you can actually brush off the pigment and start again as well. It's the 10,000 hours. It's the keep
Yes.
doing it, loving it. That whole talent thing, I think, is overrated. I think talent really is having the passion to do something so strongly that you will keep doing crappy paintings over and over and over again till you get better. Nobody comes out painting like, Da Vinci or anybody. They had to practice. And I think through that process, you learn more about yourself and what it is that really flips your switch, and narrows down the things that you're trying to achieve.
Rather than focusing on the same question each time, I'm going to just keep asking different questions of different people. But if you have anything you want to add, of course, do that. One thing I get a lot, I hear people send me notes from the podcast, and they'll say things like, I need to know, always ask this question, and that is, how do you push yourself to the next level? Is there a way? Is there oh, you guys got to see this. I'm sorry, I got to show you this. This is how we live on the lake. Look, there's a barge with a truck on it. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so is there a method that you could tell people that will help them break through? Anybody want to take that?
Sure. I would say do what Sargent did, what Soroya did, and that is they went to art school, but after they were done with art school, they were instructed, go off to the Prado and copy masterworks. You know, I also have a degree in music, and the difference between musicians and the visual arts, the musicians have to start by copying masterworks. That's how you learn things. You know, if you're a pianist, you play Chopin and Bach and Rachmaninoff and so on and so forth, because you sort of get that information into your ear. You know, the greatest pop musical group, the Beatles, how did they get so good? They were playing 8 hours a day in Hamburg, and they were studying Little Richard and the Shirelles and, you know, Motown artists and so on. And, you know, you don't have to worry that you're going to be mistaken for Richard Schmid if you copy a Richard Schmid painting, but you will learn from that. And if you copy a bunch of different masters, you will start to learn, you know, how do I solve this problem with edges? How do I solve this problem with composition? And so I strongly encourage, to this day, I copy a masterwork at least once a month. You know, and it helps you get the information into your head so that you have it to draw upon when you're solving the problem you're dealing with at that moment.
It doesn't hurt, Bill, when you have masterworks in your house.
Yes, that helps.
Don't give your dress up.
We live in a marvelous time, at least from this standpoint. We don't have to go to the Prado to see, you know, Velázquez. We can pull it up on our computers and get zoomed in tightly enough to see the brush strokes, so we can solve or learn how the master solved a specific problem. How did fashion deal with eyes? Well, I can blow up a fashion eye and just make a little copy of that eye. And what I find is that the information travels through my brush, up my arm, into my brain, and it stands a chance of staying there. If I just read about it or think about it or talk about it, I'll forget it. You know, 2 weeks from now, I'll have forgotten 90% of whatever I talked about today. But if I paint it, it stands a chance of sticking.
All right, good. Anybody else want to take that, Aaron?
About how to move forward, to grow, to
is there a way you can stimulate yourself to the next level?
Yeah, okay. With focusing on plein air painting, I would say looking for simplification, looking for the silhouette. So one of the exercises I'll have students do that sometimes drives them a little crazy is flat color plane exercises. I didn't invent the idea. You know, something that was taught to me. And that's just basically looking for average color, average value of the whole form. So if I'm looking at a mountainside, not getting lost in the little nuances, but looking at the overall color cast, temperature, value, and trying to get as close as you can, shooting for the average. And the way I would describe it is if you had a pile of colored paper and you had to cut out and paste pieces of colored paper to make your landscape, so that you know, and in that case you couldn't do halftones and little nuances in between. But doing those exercises, keeping yourself to about 30 minutes on each one with the landscape will help you to start to see the simple silhouette, the abstract shapes. It will also start to hone your compositional sense without really trying to be compositionally clever. You know, you're just trying to put together the shapes. That's helped me a lot. It's also helped me to learn to pull out salient details. You know, say now talking about doing a finished piece, taking those simple shapes and just pushing it a little bit, and you have a finished painting. I think students can get too caught up in getting engrossed in all the little details, and they get so focused on one area of the landscape that they lose the overall relationships. And simple color shape maps like that can help you to keep it clear and to learn to bring out only the details that are necessary.
I'm going to chime in just quickly.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, just a second. Albert, I just want to say something to what he was saying. There's a couple of things that I've discovered that work for me. They may not work for anybody else. The one thing is play. What I find is if I'm feeling stuck, if I feel like I'm not getting far enough, I'll just start playing. I'll start, sometimes I'll just take a brush and some color and I'll just start scribbling on my canvas and ruining the painting, deconstructing it, or take the palette knife out and deconstruct it. And I find that usually I get some kind of a breakthrough. There's something that I hadn't figured out before, that it was because I softened and edged or I pushed something back by accident, that all of a sudden something came alive. Albert, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I agree with Bill completely. If you're interested in the portrait, everything he said is right on. I've done portraits, and when I started working on landscapes, I waited. I was in Woodstock, New York, 1970 to 1983. I couldn't wait until the greens of summer disappeared so I could see the skeleton of my trees. And I went out there and drew the trees with pencil and two-ply Bristol board. And I did one after the other. And that's how I was able to get into trees, for whatever it's worth.
All right, good.
I think one other thing that can't be put aside is that if you feel like you're stuck or you aren't going as fast as you would like to master some area, think about taking either a workshop or a video class. And I would suggest you only take them from artists that you really admire, who are something similar to what you want to be like. That can shake you up and make you things that look in a different way, and take you out of the way you always do things. If you listen to the instructor and try something new and different, that can really stop that kind of downward slide you can feel. And I still take I have taken tons of workshop, and I still take workshops. How many of
you who teach workshops have had students come to your workshops and then they don't do anything you teach them?
I have. They just go back to what they feel comfortable in, because they don't want to look like a fool. They know what they can get by with.
Right.
But that's not what workshops should be about, making a masterpiece. It should be about playing and learning something new and experimenting and not having expectations.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you have to embrace the pain. When we get uncomfortable, we get frustrated, we just want to give up. But that's usually when the breakthrough is about to hit. And
Absolutely.
The mistake I made, it was good and bad, is first off, when I first started studying, I studied under two completely different people simultaneously. One was Camille Preswatic, the other was Charles White. They couldn't be more different. Charles White is, renders things very carefully, very exact, and Camille's a colorist, and she's loose and free. And it kind of screwed up my brain. And then when I got into producing these videos, the 600 videos later, I'd go to all of your shoots in many cases. And, and then I'm changing my palette, and I just keep, so I want to do what Albert does. I want to do what Stephanie does. And so I think that the idea is, I like that idea of kind of stabilize on something, get something that you're really going to try and master, whether it's a style. You don't want to copy anybody, but you want to learn the things that they have to offer. Joe McGurl gave me a hard time about that, because he said, you're all over the road. 1 minute you're David LaFell and the next minute you're me. And why don't you just, learn what I've taught you and just practice that for a couple of years. Don't change your palette. Don't do anything. Just practice that. And when I did that, that's when I started getting unsolicited compliments. And so I still fall into that a little bit where it's like, oh, I think, Jill uses this color, I'll add that color. But I at some point, I think you have to kind of stabilize and go in a direction. Thoughts?
I agree.
Yes. Just to piggyback on what you said, if you work on one thing at a time, it's better than trying to do everything. And what I mean by that is, if I'm starting a painting and I want to really focus on getting good edges, but I want the values good, and of course the design has to be there, and I can try to incorporate everything, or I could do an exercise and say, my biggest problem right now is edges. So let me practice edges. And so you just sort of chunk it. That if you work on one thing at a time, if you're a musician, and you're trying to increase your speed, you work on speed exercises. So if you're an artist and you're trying to get better at understanding values, just work on the values. And one thing that was a great breakthrough for me, I no longer make paintings because that puts too much pressure on me. Instead, I'm doing studies or exercises. And if I think of it as a study and an exercise, my internal plan is with every painting that I plan to throw it away. I do that with 2/3 of them anyway, even when I don't plan on that. So if I plan on getting rid of it, then I can experiment and work on things. And lo and behold, I can always change my mind and say, this one's pretty good. I think that I will send this one out into the world instead of the circular file.
Yeah.
To that point, that idea of chunk learning, there's research on that. When I was taking guitar lessons and trying to learn the scale, my instructor didn't say, learn the whole scale. He'd say, play this note over and over till you get that note. Now add that note. Now go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to the point where you can do it in your sleep. Then he'd say, okay, what are the next two notes? And he'd add those next two notes. And then he'd say, combine them together. So that idea of chunk learning is, they have proven now that Malcolm Gladwell wasn't completely right. It's not about 10,000 hours. It's about, if you can chunk learn something, you can learn faster, which is why when you're watching a course and you see something, rewind it and look again, say, okay, now let me try it. When you're watching Pastel Live, you're like, okay, I'm going to paint along. I'm going to try this. I'm going to rewatch it. And then I'm going to rewatch it again in 6 months or a year and see how I'm doing, and just keep practicing back and forth. Those are the things that will really elevate you fast, I think. Okay, so next question is, this is kind of Zen, I suppose, but why do you paint?
Because what I wanted to do all my life, ever since I was little. It's the only thing that interested me. I mean, I got good grades. I did well in college and academia, but I did well in advertising. But all the time in the back of my mind was, I want to paint. I want to paint. I want to paint.
Why?
How can you say what the why is? It was the only thing, what I always say, it's the only place my brain doesn't constantly whir and think about, spin and think about other things I should be doing or organizing, or it's the place where I feel calm and
awesome.
Nirvana. And even when I'm doing a crappy painting, I feel like that.
Albert, why do you paint?
Why do I paint? I don't think I have a choice about it. I sense I could have been good when I was younger. I used to draw on the streets of Brooklyn with chalk, and people told me I was a good artist, and I needed that. And when I did Santa Claus in the public school, they told me I was a good artist, and I needed that. I was considered slow and overly protected and not expected to do much with my life. In other words, being a doctor or a lawyer, it was beyond my abilities.
This is you're talking about from your parents?
Yeah,
Okay.
we come
So
from a
you found
three-room
something that you
apartment house.
excelled- You found something you excelled at, you got positive feedback, and that's what drove you.
Yeah, that was the one thing I could say, to hell with it all, I'm going to do it. And I did it.
Awesome. By the way, I want to say hello to Scotland and New Zealand. I see in the comments, I'm sure there's people all over the world. Aaron, why do you paint?
What do I paint? Yeah, again, it's one of those very, very difficult questions to answer. I wish I could say that I was like a Zen kind of calm person, but I'm not. There's a lot of chatter, a lot of noise up here that happens. And the only thing I find that really quiets the chatter is artistic expression, and primarily painting. I also act, do theater and write, and that also kind of quiets the clutter here, gets me focused on something else. And I was thinking about, just as a way of maybe a way of illustrating that, over the past handful of years, I've been doing these crazy trips where I backpack my painting gear. I've painted my way across the Grand Canyon. I've painted across the Beartooth Mountains in Montana. Generally every summer I do at least one long solo trip, up to about 6 days, painting and backpacking many miles into grizzly country. And I think about it, and it's like, this is a crazy way to get work done, right? I mean, let's go 26 miles over a mountain range or across the Grand Canyon. Like, it doesn't make any sense really to do this. There are much easier ways to get paintings. And, I started thinking about, like, why do I do this? It's not about, for me, it's not some heroic thing. It's not like, give me a, Red Bull or Mountain Dew and like, look at me, I'm this tough guy. It's not at all about that. It's that when I get 2 or 3 days into the wilderness, it is so completely immersive that the creative process is all there is, and I can't think about anything else. So I am willing to go through any kind of pain to carry a 60-pound pack if I can get to that place that I will truly be quiet. And for me, it takes that much work. And so painting's where I find that. And then the other side of that is, there's the question of if a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. I ask, if I make a painting and hide it from you, is it still art or is it just therapy? So the other part of the equation, like, why do I paint? It's the relationship. It's the way that I start a story that is incomplete, and it's the best I could tell it. And usually I'm a little bit frustrated because that's not exactly what I wanted to say with the painting. And somehow the viewer comes into it and they have their own experience, their own stories, their own memories, and they come into it and they finish the story with their own experience. And the portal is art. And to me, that's like, how do you explain that? That's so amazing to be able to have that emotional connection, sometimes with people you're never going to meet. And so I feel like, okay, if people are happy to let me keep trying to tell these stories, to start these things off that they can finish, I'm going to keep going with it.
That's one of the best feelings in the world, is to be the fly on the wall in the gallery and not tell anybody that you're the artist, and just listen to how people respond. Sometimes you don't want to hear it, but sometimes, you hear, they start crying because it reminds them of something in their life. Bill, what about you? Why do you do this?
Because it's the most interesting thing possible.
Wow.
I had a very successful pension consulting business, and we're managing many billions of dollars. But everything I needed to know, I learned sort of in the first 3 years. And then after that, it was just repeating stuff. With art, it never ends. There is a great quote from somebody, and I don't remember who it was, but, you know, an artist in their late 80s on their deathbed and said, "So soon, I was just starting to understand." And, you know, it never ends. You know, you go over a hill and there's another hill in front of you.
Yeah.
So you can always get better. And
I hear this a lot. I hear this a lot from people who are surgeons, people who are dentists, people, you know, a lot of doctors who are taking up painting because it's the same thing. You know, I learned it in medical school. I got really good at it over 10 years. And after that, it's like Groundhog Day every day. And thank goodness we have people who do that. I don't want to diminish that, but I like the idea of the challenge that you're right. There's never a perfect day, or very rarely a perfect day. You're always pushing yourself, always getting to the next level. I want to ask Carrie if Carrie has any questions from the audience. I don't know if she does. Carrie, you want to do a quick check-in, and then we're going to step off and do something for our sponsor real quickly. Carrie?
Yeah, sure. So we've got, there's quite a few questions, and you guys have actually done a really good job of actually answering these through your talk, which is pretty good. So some of them pertain to, you know, there's marketing ones, there's ones of, you know, how do I get started? One that I found kind of interesting, and I don't know fully if you guys touched on it, but a couple of people have asked, you know, what do you do when you're in a rut? Like you can't get out of the block that you're in, you're just stuck and you don't know how to move forward. Do you just keep painting every day? Do you have a method for how you try to get out of that rut? What are some of the ways that you guys would try to answer that question for them?
Who wants to take it?
I can.
Right.
I go back to what I said earlier. If I'm feeling sort of stuck, I try to identify what specifically am I stuck with. Is it shapes? Is it value? Is it edge? Is it design? And then I would pick somebody that I think is really good, you know, a sergeant, and say, how did he deal with that? And I find that in moments when I'm stuck, that's why I keep copying Masterworks to this day. I get sort of stuck and then I go back to the fountain and copy somebody. And it doesn't have to be a whole painting. It's just maybe, how did he treat this eye? Or what did he do with the edge of a shadow where it goes into the halftone? It can be little simple things, and maybe you spend 15 minutes, but I find that gets the creative juices flowing again. You know, we have to put stuff into the computer in order to get something out of it. And, you know, we need a repertoire of things that we have seen, observed, loved, whatever, as the input so that we can come out with a painting.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else want to touch on that?
No, I feel like I'm really lucky that I work in basically two mediums, oil and pastel. And as I've said on your show before, Eric, when I get really pissed off at my pastels, I work in oil as if it's the pastel's fault. You know, I go back and forth between them, and now I'm starting to work some in gouache. And each one of them teaches me something about the other. They're all pretty much layered the same way. You start with the dark and build to the light. So they're different mediums, but there's still an application similarity. And it frees me up from whatever I was having a trouble with in the other
What would you say to somebody who's like, well, hey, I could spend my whole life just focusing on my watercolor or my oil. Why would I possibly ever bother to pick up pastel, for instance?
Well, I can understand that because for years I was a watercolorist for like 25 years. But it was when I actually tried some different mediums that I started to grow. I started to see color in a different way. I started to understand how to layer things, you know, what value really means. I learned so much from the different ones. I think there's a problem if you're working in 67 different mediums and they're all applied a different way. Like watercolor, it's basically you work to the dark instead of work to the light. But I think each medium can give you a little information. But I really do just stick between oil and pastel for my gallery paintings, for plein air painting, all that kind of stuff. But dabbling in something else can get you out of a rut.
Okay, I'm going to ask Albert the same thing, because you do oil and pastel. You said that you started out as an oil painter, and we all think of you as a pastel painter, but you do both beautifully. Why would somebody who's an oil painter even consider doing pastel? I think they're...
Day, remember that every day. And after a while, I just didn't want to paint that day. It was a block, if you wish. And what I started doing and have done was draw with pencil and 2-ply Bristol board. And one day, it was in 1966, I got into this block, and I was going to have a show at the ACA Gallery in New York City in September. I said, oh my God. And then something came up from inside of me that said pastel. So I called up Dan Green and Harvey Dinnerstein and all the folks who are my friends who are a little older than me. They told me, buy this, buy that. And I bought this and I bought that. And it was a wonderful opening. Because pastel, a few things. It's a drawing, painting medium, much more so than oils. At least that's what I found. No comparison. And also, I'm used to resinous darks with oils, and you can't get that with pastel. I'm used to color mixing with oils, and if you put too much white in it, it becomes chalky. I was not chalky at all. So it was like a whole, now this time I could paint. So I had no tapes.
Yeah.
I had no tapes. And now I switch backwards and forwards with the two medium. I usually work on location on plein air with pastel, smaller, 12 by 16, 14 by 18, blah, blah. And I don't worry if I finished it or not. I just do it. And the way I find my material, this is landscape now. I don't like to drive for a long time. If I'm going to paint in Taos, I would sleep in Taos tonight. Taos is an hour and 10 minutes. I walk towards the waterfall, and if something hits me en route, I really take that very seriously. I always have my eyes open. And when something hits me, it means something out there is touching something inside of me. So you see how vague this is as compared to portrait work, which I've done. So I've become more intuitive, and I switch mediums. I work larger with oils in the studio, and I turn my pastels and my other stuff into shells, and I turn them around, and I can work with pastel and oil in the studio. Some of the plein air paintings I don't touch at all. Some of them I throw away. And some of them I do some work on after I have a fresh look at it. So this is not so much right and wrong. I wish it was. I wish it was.
All right.
And I
Excellent.
know there's no Z in this alphabet. I wish there was.
Awesome. Bill, when we did Pastel Live, we launched it 2 years ago. I felt obligated to learn how to do pastel because here I am asking people to learn pastel and I wasn't doing it myself. And so I got pastel and I started playing with it. And then I watched, basically as much as I could when I was working on that. And it's like it all assimilated. I didn't become a master overnight. I'm not suggesting anybody could, but it assimilated. And I started seeing things that I could do and I could only do with pastel that I couldn't do with oil. But the thing that I found really interesting is that all of a sudden it changed my technique in oil. It opened up new horizons, things that I had never thought of doing because I had learned about them on Pastel Live. What is your experience with that and the oil versus pastel? Because you do both too.
Basically the same experience. I tell all of my oil painting students, you should study pastel as well, because there are certain things you can do in pastel that are extraordinarily easy, that are difficult in oil. But once you see them in pastel, you want to accomplish that in the other medium. I'll give you a quick example. I blend with my pastels, so all of my edges in pastel are automatically soft, and I have to think to make a sharp edge. In oil, if you make a stroke, it's going to have a sharp edge, and you have to think to make it soft. So it's 180 degrees different. But in pastel, you get used to seeing all these soft edges, and in oil, you get used to seeing all of these hard edges. And if you do both mediums, then you end up with a more balanced approach on edges. In oil painting, it's easy as pie to get a thin, transparent, rich dark. You can take transparent oxide brown, a little bit of ultramarine blue, add some medium to it, and you've got a thin, transparent dark. For pastel, it's difficult, but once you see it in oil, you want to see it in pastel. And so it forces the artist to grow maybe in directions that are not easy based on the medium, but doing both of them, you get a more well-rounded approach to things. So anyway, that's what I have found.
Okay, Aaron?
I've never had anybody who's taken up both of those mediums who said, nope, I really should have just spent my time on one.
Yeah. Aaron?
Let me go back real quick to the question before about feeling stuck, and then because I was just thinking about a time in my 30s that kind of emotionally was just a really tough time. I was feeling really low, feeling really stuck, feeling like my work was terrible, and that I was getting nowhere. And it's funny because I look back on that years later and I realized that was the breakthrough. It was not the moment of breakthrough. It was the moment of just lasting through that period of frustration and feeling down.
It was pre-breakthrough.
Yeah, well, no, it was the breakthrough. I just didn't recognize it until later.
I see.
So, so what I think about is in terms of feeling stuck or kind of being in tune with your feelings on painting, take stock of them. Coach, and I love coaching new people because they are just making these gains week by week, boom, boom, boom. They're getting better at new skills. And then there's a certain point where where making those gains takes a lot more time and a lot more patience. And so it can feel like, God, I'm not getting anywhere, but you are if you're putting the time in. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling down about your work, have a look at those feelings, greet those feelings, say, yep, this is real, but recognize that you might look at it differently a little bit later. Because yeah, absolutely. I think, the my most award-winning piece that I'd had in my entire career was done at my lowest point, and I didn't realize it until later. Just push through, and then recognize that as you mature as an artist, the growth is going to start coming slower because it's the littler and littler things. The acuity of vision is getting greater, and so it's going to be harder to feel like you're having a moment of breakthrough or growth.
There's one value in just knowing that it's normal. that what you're going through, this idea of being depressed or being stuck or being frustrated, it's just part of the process. It's part of life.
Yeah.
And okay, now talk to me about oil versus pastel, because you do both.
Yep.
What are the pros and cons of that?
It's a funny thing, because I wish, I'll even, like, I'm just about to go to the Door County Plein Air, leaving on Saturday. And every once in a while, like, I'm packing for a Plein Air show like that. And I think, all right, maybe this time I should just pack one medium. Everybody else is just working in one medium, but I'm packing pastel and oil. Just because it's like I have these two muses, and sometimes one is hitting and one is working, and one is not. Like, I think back to the last 2 years of Laguna Plein Air. 2 years ago, I was super frustrated with my pastels, and my oils were I was making discoveries. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing more oils on this one. And then the next year it was the opposite. So I've learned not to fight with it too much. I think part of the reason I got into oil was that the workshops that were available to me when I was learning, I would just take whatever would come up to Montana, and it was always oil painters. So I started doing oil because, kind of that's what the workshop instructors were that were available. But I find that, you learn from pastel, making color commitments in pastel because you have to, like saying, okay, this is as close as I have to the color of that mountain. I'm just going to put it down, and then I'm going to react to what's there. And so then I put a stroke down and I say, okay, is that too bright, too warm, too cool? How do I play around and experiment? And at the start of every painting, I feel a sense of despair because I feel like this, I don't have enough palette. I don't have enough colors. This isn't going to work. And then I start playing around and layering, and suddenly somehow it does. So I can carry that color boldness into my oil work, because oil you can tend to mix and mix and mix so that it becomes tentative. So pastel has taught me to be more bold in my color choices with oil. Oil has taught me to attend to edges more, because you have to work harder to get a variety of edge work in oil. So each medium has taught me something about the other medium.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Carrie.
Yes. Hi. So we have another question, a couple of questions. So obviously with oil paints, watercolor, acrylic, you blend your colors together to get different colors. You've got the color wheel. You can start with primary, move to secondary, and it's easier because you can blend the colors together to get what you want. With pastel, it's quite a bit harder, because I know from my own experience that if you don't have the right color, sometimes it can turn the painting into something different. Since all of you guys are oil painters, but also pastel, how do you kind of overcome that issue of, do I have the right color? Have you found a way to blend your pastels together to get the color you need? Or do you just keep growing your palette so that you have the colors you need whenever you need them?
Or does it matter?
Can I take that one?
Yeah.
You can do with oils by putting some white into it and all that. With pastels, you can't. There's two things that I do. I make use of a lot of different colors of similar value, which takes the value which might be correct, let's say, and rounds it out so it's not just one color. as far as darkness and lightness goes, I have found by varying the pressure, my dark colors can get a little lighter and fit right in there if I vary the pressure just a touch. And I think pastelers are doing that if they know it or not. And this is true with light colors. If it's too bright, just relax a little bit with the same piece of chalk and put it on with less emphasis, and it gets darker. This is something. I found this for me a revelation. That's my answer.
Okay.
Realize there's more than one color to each pastel stick.
All right.
And
Great.
darker colors can get lighter by varying the pressure, and lighter colors, white and all that, can get a bit darker by going lighter with the application. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you, Albert. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the big question, the best advice, the most important advice that you can give or that anyone ever gave you as an artist. We're going to start with Albert first.
Dedicate at least 1 hour to dedicate towards drawing. Figure out, you might have to use, my advice is to copy somebody rather than try and work from your own photography. Work for 1 hour, even if it kills you. I mean, you know what I mean. Stay there.
Yeah.
Do
stick
it by
with it.
clock. But make a conscientious copy of somebody's painting that you like and wish you had done. And stay there for an hour. And the next day, go back and stay there for an hour. No two ways about that hour. No two ways. After a while, I hope the hour becomes an hour and a half. Do this. It's much better than nothing, and it could lead you into something. Good luck.
I think that's great advice. And you know, even if you're sitting around with your family watching television, you can still have a sketch pad in your hand.
No, I don't agree.
Okay, let's hear it.
I don't agree you're sitting around with your family and you're watching TV with a sketch pad. No, I don't believe in that at all. That's
Okay.
not what I said.
All right. I stand corrected.
You're
Okay.
forgiven.
Focus 1 hour. Albert, don't write me out of your will, buddy.
I won't, sweetheart.
All right. Bill?
Do you say Bill or Jill?
I said Bill.
Okay.
You know, rather than, you know, working for 5 hours on a Sunday and then not doing anything for the rest of the week, it's better if you can only do 15 minutes. When I was still working in my pension consulting business, I forced myself to draw, if only for 15 minutes before I went to sleep at night. And you learn so much more from doing it on a daily basis rather than trying to do it all at once, 1 day a week, and then ignoring it the other. The days that you're not practicing, you're going backwards. And so if you practice every day, you'll be going forwards.
One of the things I noticed when I was in Russia hanging out with friends is that they always had a sketch pad with them in their pocket. And we'd be standing in line at a grocery store or something, and they're sketching people. And I asked them about it, and they said, you know, you just have to keep your hand-eye coordination alive. You just got to always be drawing.
Yes.
All right. Now we have Jill. Jill?
Well, we all seem to be on the same lane. Draw, draw, draw. There's no getting away from drawing. I have often heard my students say, well, I don't want to draw, I just want to paint. And you can't really get from there to there without drawing. But what I really have found super helpful is going to figure drawing and portrait classes. And not because I want to be a portrait painter or a figure painter, but because if you can realistically capture a body or a likeness, you can probably draw anything. So, if you're off just a smidge on where the eye is positioned, or if you've got a rib coming out the wrong way, the drawing just doesn't work. So I really focus on most of my drawing in that area. The big thing that somebody said to me that really changed the way I looked at my painting was you be you. Quit trying to be somebody else, just be you.
Okay. All right. Excellent. We promised 7 steps, and we actually touched on each of the 7 steps, but we didn't actually put them in list form here. So I do apologize. But if you go back to your notes, those are the key things, starting with drawing, copying, getting yourself to experimentation, copying masters, etc. Aaron.
No, I'm really inspired by getting to share this time with all of you guys, and I'm taking notes at what everyone else is saying here, because I feel like we're just all fellow travelers, just at different points on the journey. So I have 2 things that I want to touch on. One is some advice I got at a key time early in my career from an artist that I admired, and he talked about the ambition of an aspiring artist. You're chasing deadlines, you're chasing shows, and you finally get in that show and you get some recognition for, say, a certain kind of painting. And so then it's easy to start to try to paint that kind of thing again because it worked in that other show. And he said, you have to have the opportunity to fail. And I love that he used the word opportunity as if like, oh, this is a great thing, let's fail. And that has stuck with me, so that I'm not focused on chasing deadlines, chasing shows. I am focused on growth. The other thing he said about that is, if you're focusing on growth over the product, he said, obviously you're going to be the better artist in the long term, but he said you will also have the better career, because you'll be, because it will be varied and your work will show that maturity. So that has really stuck with me over the years. The second one, I'm going to call this cultivating selfishness. I have students that come into workshops sometimes and they say, I really, really would like to be able to paint like you. And I look at their materials that they bring to a workshop and I think, well, I can't paint like me with those materials. So take yourself seriously. If you're in this, be all in. So that means getting the materials that will help you succeed. In this case, sign up for the Pastel Live and really invest in it and invest in yourself. Take yourself seriously and you will grow. And then the last thing with that, with something like whether it's a workshop or Pastel Live, the most important part of any workshop is the weeks after the workshop. It's when you take the time to really sit with yourself and do work within the next couple of weeks after a workshop. Because during a workshop, you're getting flooded with new information. It's afterwards that you can start to really ingest it and make it your own.
Yeah, especially because, you're a little worried about all the people around you and how you're going to look, and you need to kind of get used to it. But I think that's great advice. When I went to a Tony Robbins event, I booked a full day of hotel room after the event, and I spent one full day going over my notes and picking out the things I wanted to work on. And the reason I did that is because I knew the minute I got back to my normal life, I would get consumed with my normal life and busyness. And I think a great thing to do to just expand on that is if you go to a workshop, take a couple of days, if you can afford to, take a couple of days after the workshop and just focus on your notes, what you learned, practice what you learned. This is why we do the Plein Air convention the way we do. We say, okay, we're going to learn in the morning, and then you're going to go out in the afternoon, practice what you learned, because the sooner you get brush to canvas or pastel to paper, and you put those things in your head, you're going to learn them faster. That's why I like it when people either paint along during Pastel Live, or they take notes and then they watch it again and they paint along, and sometimes return to it time and time again. Okay, any final thoughts, people? Let's have fun. Let's have some fun.
Right?
We've
I
been
always
having
want to have fun when
Yeah.
Well, I would encourage everybody, if you go through your notes from today, I went through and I came up with 7 things, but there were more things than 7. Draw, take the opportunity to fail, experiment, embrace your fear, because that's when you're just breaking through. Control the voices in your head. Don't worry about your style. It'll find you. It's like your signature. It will find you. And then step out of your comfort zone. Everybody here has experienced tough times, bad paintings, voices in their head, but they continue to experience them. It's just part of the ongoing process. So
Can I add one thing?
I think we'll take a vote. Anybody?
Can I add one thing?
Of course.
You've heard wonderful advice. There's no failure.
That's right. No failure.
No failure.
I had to write that down. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, of course. There's no failure. You're going to do it. Decide which technique, which learning technique you're going to use it, and there's no failure.
All right. Well, and you're learning from every mistake.
Of course. And you're learning from every asset, not just the mistakes. Don't worry about the mistakes. Don't worry about finishing the picture. Just do them.
Yeah, like Bill said, it's a sketch. Don't make it precious.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody else? Any final thoughts?
I have a final thought. You're the artist. You're in charge of quality control. I heard that from Bill Parks probably 1,000 times. And I think what he meant was that we get to make decisions. If you're doing a landscape and the tree happens to be dead in the center of your painting, you don't have to put it there. You're in charge of quality control. You can decide to move that tree in your painting. You can decide what to put in, what to leave out. The question of style is basically the habitual decisions that we make about what to put in and what to leave out. And so after a while, you keep making similar decisions, and then people say, "Oh, I love your style." It's these habitual decisions.
Excellent.
I like it.
Excellent. Anybody else?
I think my final thought would be just a sense of gratitude. Realizing that there's this amazing community out there is really, really encouraging. Like, to feel part of a tribe, because it can be a little lonely being an artist from time to time. So I take a lot of energy from all of you.
The thing I hear often, Aaron, is when people come to my retreats like Fall Color Week, they say, nobody here is judging me. I'm painting next to, John McDonald or somebody, Joe McGurl or somebody like that. And yet nobody's judging me. Everybody's embracing me. Everybody's helping me. And that's what's so wonderful about this community, and we're all happy people because we're doing what we love.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of our artists, and I hope you guys will find an opportunity to put some quotes that you've seen today from some of these artists out on social media. Thank you again to our artists. We love you guys. You gave us a lot of great insights and a lot of great time today. I'm very grateful to you. We're looking forward to seeing you on Pastel Live and seeing you whenever we see you. Okay, well, that was pretty interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to our guest. Let's get right to the Marketing Minute. You can send your art marketing questions to Eric at artmarketing.com, and you can come live on the podcast during the Marketing Minute if you want, or you can directly send your questions to me. Let's get this thing rolling.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
Okay, so I'm going to take your questions and try to get them the best I can. We also put this on the Art Marketing Minute as a separate podcast. That's why you see the Plein Air podcast set beside me, because we're doing it from the Plein Air podcast, in case you're wondering if you're listening. Okay, this is from Sandy White in Colorado, who says, I am finally getting into marketing my own artwork. What are the first things that I should be doing? Sandy, congratulations. You've asked a loaded question because marketing is vast and it includes so much. And I will go into some depth, but all these answers are in my book, or maybe most of them are. But let's touch on some of the key things. First off, you ask yourself, why? Why am I marketing? Why do I want to market? What do I hope to accomplish? You need to be very specific, not broad. For instance, instead of saying, I want to sell more art, which is broad, you say, I want to sell $500 of art in every single month, or 5,000 or 500,000, or whatever your number is. Now, we all have different reasons for our why. And that's why we have to define what we want first, because marketing isn't always about selling art. It is always about selling yourself and your brand, but you might do it for different reasons. You might do it for recognition. You might do it for awareness. You might want to get galleries to pick you up. You might be marketing to get invited to all the great parties in your town. And of course, you might be marketing to sell art. So, and you might want all those things, but you got to pick one and make that your primary focus. So make a list of everything that you want, prioritize it, define that list exactly into exact terms, and then set some goals. Your goals will determine the actions that you take, because each action requires a different approach in most cases. So once you get some goals, break them into small steps, what I call micro goals. I like weekly goals. I have a weekly goal every week of the year for my entire year, based on my big initiatives I'm trying to accomplish. So you can do that too. It's not hard. It takes some time, but it's not hard. Just follow a plan, so it's not all or nothing at once, right? So we can't get it all at once, no matter how hard we try, no matter how much money we have, we can't get it all at once. There are things you can do to stimulate things better with those things. But to get noticed, to get started selling, you've got to gradually build sales with confidence before you pull the trigger. You know, if you decide you want to go full-time and replace your full-time income, then you've got to kind of get used to it first. So don't just jump in and quit your job. I don't recommend that. I think you want to keep that job, because things always take longer and cost more money than you think they will. And having that job will help you, and you'll be able to just work two jobs simultaneously, your art and that job, right? Also, you need to decide where your focus is going to lie. Is it local, regional, national, international? It becomes more complex and more expensive the more you add to that and expand. But I want to recommend that every artist ultimately has a local strategy and a national strategy. And the reason I say that is because local is really important to you, because you can get involved in local things and become a celebrity locally, and that's going to buy you a lot of parties and invitations and things like that. And you're going to get seen, and there's money in your town who will buy your paintings. But a national strategy is also good, because sometimes the local towns have bad economies, and you want to have a strategy so you can go where the money is, where fish are jumping into the boat, so to speak, right? So this list, of course, is the top of the iceberg. But start defining what you want your life to look like, what you need financially, what you want to be able to do, such as travel or workshops or other things, perks. And then, maybe it's building the ultimate studio like Lori Putnam did. She's famous now, but she came to me, she was broke. We built a plan. I helped her with her marketing. She built her ultimate studio and makes more money than she ever thought possible in her life. And it's very possible. It just takes time and dedication. She's worked very hard at it for 10 solid years. And she made really good progress fast, but she makes more and more progress. The longer you keep it going, you build momentum. She's passionate, she's driven, she works hard, and she's also become a better marketer than me because she's really good at it. She's got good instincts. And so if you study it, you can become that too. So I hope that helps. The second question comes from Scott in Dalton, Pennsylvania, who says, this is a long one. I'm driven to specialize in biblical narrative compositions in the style of Caravaggio, late Titian, and late Rembrandt in the Tenebrism tradition. I don't know what that means. I'm drawing upon an education in biblical studies, 20 years of managing a high-end picture framing and manufacturing business, and a lifelong connection with the church. Over the last 24 years, I have researched museum conservation bulletins, technical books, and the old masters and frequented museums. I am making my own panels using historical pigments sourced from regions in Europe where old masters are likely to have acquired theirs. You would like our video that Eric Johnson did. He goes through a lot of that. Anyway, using high quality linen, traditional techniques with a restricted palette, and I aim to create quality paintings that will age well far beyond my lifetime. Let's hope so. I prioritize creating powerful and dynamic images that evoke contemplation. Currently, I'm working on donating 2 8-foot by 16-foot paintings for a church ceiling installation. One is an intimate, dramatic composition of the Last Supper, and the other is an eerie landscape with Christ carrying his cross. My primary goal is to create a masterpiece that is worthy of appreciation, as though by the hand of an old master, or as I would say, a new master, right? I feel that I will be ready to begin promoting my work sometime next year. What type or which type of media do you think would be the most effective in showcasing my work? Wow, Scott, that's very impressive. Man, I'd like to see your work. I'll look it up. You know, that's a loaded question because it's really a question that is not answerable because you haven't given me enough data. You see, you have to know the purpose or the desire. You say you want to start marketing, but for what purpose? Are you going to give away paintings? You got to do more donations? What are you going to do? Most people think about advertising and where they want to advertise before they even consider what goals and outcomes they want, which is really not the right thing to do because you end up spending a lot of money you don't need to spend when you don't, it's like, taking your car and putting it on auto drive and not knowing where it's going, right? So you want to begin promoting your work to what end, I ask. Okay, I can imagine a lot of scenarios like wanting more commissions, wanting to sell collectors, wanting galleries, seeking recognition or galleries. I'm sure there's many, many more, but I'd like you to go into depth with your answers. Asking which media I should use is kind of like saying which tool should I use to build something. Well, it all depends on what you want to build, how fast you want to build it, how long you want it to last, what are the weather conditions it's going to be exposed to. All those things matter because your tools and materials matter. So marketing doesn't have to be complex. It's a simple solution to overcome a problem or take advantage of an opportunity. But I can't solve a problem until I know what the problem is. And you can't either. So you need to define that. Media choices can accomplish a lot of different things for you and at different levels. My magazine, Fine Art Connoisseur, for instance, reaches a lot of really mega rich billionaire type art collectors who love realism. But it may not reach people who commission church paintings, for instance. My neighbor was put in charge of a mega church commission of a mosaic, and she spent 5 or 10 years on it. She didn't even know my magazine existed. She went to Florence, found answers there, ended up getting an artist there to do it who spent 5 years building this and then shipping it over and installing it. So, you need to figure out where the fish are that you want to bite and that you want to catch, right? So, first off, you got to know what the problem is. Start by stating the desired outcome. And if that's, I want to get more commissions, then get specific. How many more commissions? 1 commission, 2 commissions, and at what amount of money? If you want 1 commission within 12 months, and I know you have to work in advance because you're going to be working on one for a long time, then, what are you willing to spend to get that commission? Are you willing to spend 10%, 5 to 10, sometimes 20% marketing expense is pretty normal. And so if you get $100,000 commission, will you spend 10 grand or 10% to get that commission, it's probably worth it, right? And so sometimes it's not about advertising though. It might be a matter of a couple of phone calls or asking the right people who the right people are. Or maybe it's advertising. Maybe it's in a church publication that church art curators read or something. I don't know. You're going to have to figure that out. But answer those questions first, and then I can suggest the tools you need. And you can ask again on here, and I'll give you more answers. It might not be media at all, though, right? Hope this helps. Anyway, that is today's Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Hope you enjoyed today's podcast. A little different, a little departure. Thanks to our 4 guests. And email your questions to me, eric@artmarketing.com. A couple of reminders. Get on that wait list for Plein Air Japan if you want to go paint cherry blossoms in March. It's going to be spectacular. It's a VIP trip. Check out Fall Color Week at fallcolorweek.com. Check out Pastel Live, pastellive.com. And check out the Fine Art Trip, which is going to be this fall. It's going to be spectacular. I actually tried to do a pre-trip trip to see Zorn in Mora. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm trying. So anyway, get registered. Okay, that's at finearttrip.com. I have a blog on Sundays called Sunday Coffee. Just go to coffeewitheric.com to subscribe so you get it. And I'm on the air daily on Facebook on a thing called Art School Live, where hundreds and hundreds of artists do demonstrations for free. And it's noon Eastern every weekday. You can subscribe on YouTube by searching Art School Live and hit the subscribe button. Also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Eric Rhoads. I am that person, Eric Rhoads, founder and publisher of Plein Air magazine. Long time ago, man, time flies. Thank you for your time today. And thanks again for the letter from Poland. I'd like to hear from more of you. It's a big world out there. Let's go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the Plein Air Podcast with Plein Air Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.